This video is an unplanned follow-on to one that I had just made about finding the template for the hero's journey in Hinduism. And because of that video, and it was just a short one for chapter number 1, I'll post a link down below, but it prompted the realization of other things that I want to talk about. And this is going to be really information for the people that are looking to find this template in the material from antiquity, this template that Joseph Campbell identified. And it's been further identified as a self-healing template. The Joseph Campbell template is what I want to kind of take a look at, but it can be refined. He stayed a little mystic with some things where we can dial it into something a little bit more specific. Going into the belly of the whale is going to be going into the place where we have our fears, for example. We'll translate it into something that's a little bit more mentally interactive. It won't be so mystical for us. My name is Dan Paulson. Welcome to the channel. And yeah, you might want to start with that video below. I kind of fumbled around with it a little bit, but the main purpose of it was to show how in the stories as we are going off on these adventures that we are whatever the hero is. We are the ones going on the hero's journey if we're turning it inward and going on an inward healing path. That we become the person in the story that is on the path, and that we have supernatural aid. There's some kind of a God watching over us, giving us help along the way, that can't do what we have to do for ourselves, but can advise us. And that those emerge as properties of our psyche that are held in the story in analogs, that our conscious is, the person that is on the journey, and the higher self, the part that can look at ourselves from a detached perspective, detached from the emotions, can advise the conscious on how to straighten out your issues. Here's what you've done to become the way you are, to feel the way you are, and your life is unfolding as a result of that. And now you want to interact with it. Here's what you must do. You must go face these issues, resolve these things right here, then they stop guiding your life along that way. But this higher self is doing this. This is where the supernatural aid comes in. This is actually not really supernatural. It's indicating that there is a higher part of us someplace, somewhere, that can see what's going on and can help the conscious deal with stuff, instead of allowing the conscious to be in charge and just say, I'm never going to deal with that stuff. So this is a part of the teaching that is emerging, and that's what I wanted to show, that how that happened in there. Also, what we saw in this story is how right off the beginning, it begins by grabbing people. It's naming certain gods or certain people that are driving chariots. There's a lineage of people that are very specifically specified that are going to be going with him. And if we were to look in other material, if we were to look at the Argonautica, a Greek myth, contemporaneous from the same time frame, we're going to see that as Jason is getting ready to go sail and to go after what he's after, the Golden Fleece ultimately, that he's gathering up 40 Argonauts, that there are people, and it names who they are, where they come from. It's that same sort of a thing going on. If we look at Jesus, we see right in the beginning, he gets 12 disciples. He names them, where they come from, who they're off, or the Bible tells us that. Jesus doesn't, but that same thing is happening in the beginning of the story. As things are happening, there's a group of something being gathered up. This, in the hero's journey, is going to be a pattern that emerges. I don't know that it's necessarily identified, but you are gathering up people to go with you. Now, what these emerge as, though, is if you were to go to their culture, their time, that names derive from some sort of a characteristic or a quality, a sense of justice, a sense of balance, a sense of fair play, fear, doubts. Those names are going to be somehow carrying those kind of qualities that are a part of who and what we are. They emerge inside of us. And in different teachings, they've just called them different things. The analogs are still there. They're still classifying it. You can see that in place, but they're changing what it means to their culture. So there are variations in there that make it kind of difficult to see. But if you step back and go, okay, you know what? They're gathering people that they're naming. What are those names? What do those names mean? Here is something else that I think is important to consider when we're deciding what those names mean, that they have some sort of a value. That if we're using the template for the hero's journey, that emerges as something, that you're gathering up people that are these people. However, if we go to Taoism and Buddhism, we do not find that happening, although the teaching still gets us to the same spiritual place. So they're not using those analogous terms to carry that. But if you look at Buddhism, you will find something very plain language. It is very much condensed, but it'll say things like, a virtuous man is this, a man who is not prone to, giving in to temptation. There are values and virtues that are being talked about that are necessary components of this trip of being strong, being on course, not being connected, not being controlling, all of that. So that's another way of looking at those names and realizing that if you wanted to, you could spend a lot of time and really dig into that. But I believe what is going to emerge is this idea that you have to have the qualities necessary to go do it. So they're identified extensively for them. They need to tell stories. We need to get to the point. Imagine thousands, millions of people with nothing to do at the end of the day. They're not going to work doing things like we are. Their life is not like ours. We bring our biases with us. These stories would be as big to them as our media is to us today. In fact, I kind of look at Greek mythology and look at it like a modern day, like there was a successful television show that spawned a bunch of spin-offs from it. All of their stories link together. The gods continue on. The characteristics move from place to place. People are continuing to build off of the same qualities and characteristics. It's actually networking into a big story thing with gods, and it's a whole big life actually that is created in fantasy to carry this story. I kind of think that most people that are like listening to and passing these stories around that are not educated, that can't read and can't write, but are passing them around are, they've got their favorite characters, their favorite gods that they identify with. And, like we would today with sports figures or something like that, that they're doing the same thing with their media. And maybe that bias we can bring with us. What is Hercules up to in this episode? Is Hera going to be good or bad? Yeah, I kind of see that happening if you look through the stories and step back, that there's a network of things going on that is entertainment but educational. And I believe that's what it looks like to me. Imagine, if you will, and I'll use an example from what I'm familiar with in the U.S., a television show that went on that was called Cheers, and then there was a spinoff from it called Frasier. And then I think there were other spinoffs that didn't make it. But if you can envision something like that where, in that case, the spinoff was highly successful. Imagine that there was a show about Cliff and then a show about Sam and, Woody. Each one goes on and they become successful. That's the kind of emergence that I see. So you can spin off from each one of them. But that might not be a good way to look at it. In this case, we're making stories, but here's the criteria. Whatever spinoff is has to be created on that template too. In fact, you can see like a tale of this, I believe, if you were, I don't recall now, the original version of the Argonautica, where there was a writing of the leaving of the island of stinky women. That got changed later. There's different ways that came about, leaving the island where the old gods were, or the island of the Amazons where Hercules got off. And if you see that, you'll see Hercules' story picks up from there. You can see these one story goes off and has Hercules leave it an island and continues on. And then another story picks up where Hercules gets off that island and goes off onto his adventures. But from the island of the stinky women, these ladies had taken a king and set one of them that was in charge and, set him adrift. Boom, that's the end of the story. There's a place right there where somebody can come along and grab that and trail off another branch of that story. I think that's why they do that. It doesn't go anywhere. Why would they just set him adrift and leave it there? And if you look at where that is emerging on the template, in all cases, all of these spin-offs are happening before crossing the threshold, before going into the subconscious. So they're allowing other adventures to begin that have not yet delved into the subconscious. That's a place to create the next spin-off. That's what I see emerging. And Hindu works do the same thing. They have that monstrous complexity that goes all over the place. So when we're reading something like this, we're just seeing little bits and pieces of a bigger picture. The gods always stay the same. People get to know these, and it becomes a part of what they think about, what their culture is, what they occupy themselves with mentally. It would become a much bigger thing. I think these stories, we really look at them simple, but I believe that they are incredibly complicated if we can try to leave our biases behind and go to their world and try to become them. We have to treat them as something very complicated and not something very simple. So there's a lot of parts that can be in here that we can kind of dissect today. We know things by probably 6th grade that, 7th, 8th grade that people back then, adults dying of old age, never knew that much. The kids can read and write. That was not in place back then, but the minds are sharp. There is not an availability of getting education, but there is an availability of passing stories, and I think these are really important that way. But we see the elements as we step back continue to emerge. Also, what is the story about? Remember, we've ultimately realized that the family in the field is our old life, that this is the products of what we have produced in life. And they're all qualities that we want to leave behind. And they might be things that we like, that we enjoy, or things that we hate. We're going to struggle with it. I like doing this, but it's bad for me. We need to leave things behind. And we struggle to do that if we're trying to change our life. Nested in here is this idea that if you want to change your life, you must battle and defeat and do something to get rid of this. So what is being held in the story metaphorically is there is land that is being used by family members that are not giving it back. We went to Jericho, remember Joshua and Jericho, and everybody's marching around the walls and they're getting ready to, what is inside is something that is evil. The story sounds a little bit different, but metaphorically, when it's playing out in the mind, they're analogs that are carrying the same teaching, that there is something inside of you that is bad that must be defeated. We can find the same thing in Jesus's work, where there's a field or a vineyard that's been rented out or taken over and you're trying to go get it back. There's variations in the way the story sounds on the outside if you don't interpret it, but once you interpret it and realize all of those component parts are just variations of the same thing, then it comes online. When I interpret now, I realize now what I do is I know the template, and when I read something, I read it and look for where it fits on the template. And that literally sounds like, and it is this, that when I read something, I grab and I pull it and I put it onto the template, which doesn't sound right, does it? I'm fitting this to what I want it to fit to. So let me back up a little ways and describe that, because I've thought about that. I want to make sure I stay objective. I didn't start doing that. When I first started doing this, I just recognized, I didn't know the Joseph Campbell hero's journey, but I'm going through this material for my own reasons, thinking, I don't believe any supernatural, but there's something going on here. And I'm not connected with all of the people out there that are fighting over who's right or who's wrong. I'm looking at it on my own thinking, none of them have got it. There's something here that I see. And that was my life obsession, kind of going after that and gradually finding the Joseph Campbell or becoming aware of his material and realizing that's it. I didn't have it. I didn't see that. I was seeing the template, but I didn't understand it. I didn't see it completely. Then but by then I'm decoding the material. I'm realizing it plays out in the psyche. I don't know the template, but I know the parts. I know that I have to forgive, that I have to let things go, that I have to heal, that I have to be able to talk it out, that I know all of those parts. So I'm doing already the things that the template teaches you to do. I just didn't know the template, and that template, wherever it existed, was teaching those same things. So I knew where to go. I didn't know how the template worked. Eventually I learned that, and now I realize that template is what everything is built upon, so that, I do look for that template. Instead of trying to find it from the outside, I realize this is what I found the template as a shepherd boy going, teach me this. Let me figure it out. Let me spend my lifetime going through this story and figuring it out. And then I found the template that way. But now that I know the template, I can teach it as the teacher of the one who says, here's the template. Go make a story out of this. I can see it in a more broad sense now. And if you learn that template, that's exactly what will be helpful. That template is what everything else exists upon. The teaching in the template is going to be consistent. So looking for it everywhere else is just a fun exercise in finding the comparisons. They're all going to get to the same place, and that's that self-healing template. Few are going to go. It's going to be a struggle. It's in your psyche. It's a psychological thing. It's up to you. You're your guru. You have to talk to your higher self. You have to interface with your subconscious and change the feelings that you have that are derogatory, that are causing you to act out in ways that metaphorically we're being told to, in all variety of material, to make friends with the skeletons in your closet, or to exorcise your demons, to make sure to pull the weeds out of your garden, to change your frequency, to transmute lead into gold. Many analogous ways of telling us to change the way we feel about something that is causing it to emerge one way so that it stops emerging that way. They're all getting to that same place. And then we make amends. We talk it out with people. We stop holding our fear. We stop hiding behind the fear. And then when we do that, we emerge. We have, oh, yay, we feel good. Life is better. We've just gone on the hero's journey. That's basically the template. And think about this for a second. The template doesn't exist as something that is created that we must follow. That if we need to self-heal, we have to stop. We got to look inward. We have to decide what to do. We have to decide we're going to get over our fears. We have to know this. If not intuitively, then at least experientially. If we know it academically, we're just going to know we have to do it and we won't do it. We're going to be denying the call. But if we go through this procedure, we're going to feel better. We're going to make amends. We're going to emerge and feel better. The template emerges because that is what we must do to heal. The template is built on us. We don't build what we do on the template. The template's the natural procedure. There are additional parts that show up along the way. We get into Jesus material and you will hear things like, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened. This is not a spiritual teaching about, this is not part of the template. What this is part of something that tells you we have discovered that people who are really focused in on this stuff get knowledge and get information, that somehow it emerges from places. That if you're really open-minded and you're looking for this, things are going to emerge for you. I got some fun stories on that. Maybe I'll save one for the end of this video in case anybody has any interest in it. It's a weird, I'll call it a psychic story just to keep your interest. There's nothing psychic. So at any rate, it's one that I don't talk about very much. Anyway, so the template, if you learn the template, it will be much easier to find these things. And then the stories are built off of that template. That's why I said in the last video, as far as trying to get into Christianity, they are doing things that are really long drawn out to carry the teaching in that population of people that have, they have stories. That is what they have, and they can talk to each other. The stories can't be just some simple little thing. And imagine sitting there your entire life going, oh, my head is empty. I got nothing to do, nothing to think about. These stories would be absolutely huge. Imagine how many thousands would have been passed around and made up by people that never were significant enough to be written down, or maybe they didn't make it. Destroyed in them. Alexandria. Who knows all the material that's been lost. At any rate, here's what we have, and I see that this is very consistent throughout a lot of material. So the pattern, at some point, I realize I'm not. You're not forcing it to fit. You can force it to fit onto Christianity. You can grab Jesus' work and force it to fit. That's what scares me. You think, am I doing that? Am I forcing it to fit someplace where I have a belief? But I didn't approach this thinking there's a template, I'm going to go prove it. I approached it going, there's something weird here. I see something common and I don't know what it is. And you poke at it until you go, I see a template that you can show people. You can also say, I see a Jesus, but I can't show that to anybody. You can show people the template. You can show what is there. If you go with an open mind, you do find what is there. And that's why I think it's okay to realize that's what you're doing. You're trying to find how it fits on the template. Taoism, Buddhism, and the works of Jesus do not exist on that template. I need to remember to caveat that, the works of Jesus. What I mean is the Sermon on the Mount, Sermon on the Plain, or the collection of, like the Gospel of Thomas. Actually, the works that are Matthew, Mark, and Luke are the ministry is actually built on the hero's journey, but it's incredibly difficult to extract. I would not recommend touching it until you know what the template really is. It's difficult to pull it out of there, and it has a lot of attachment to it that makes it difficult to extract, I think. But they hold all of the pieces and parts. They still teach everything. They simply they don't do it in a story fashion that is made to carry you from event to event. You're selected and now you get on your ship and you sail to somewhere where you pick up your people. It doesn't do that. It just starts right off into, you are a product of what you have named. It goes right into what you have to do. So it exists a little bit different, but when you're looking into mythologies and religions, Hinduism, Judaism, a lot of other things, this is that template that you will see emerge in those areas. Again, if you learn the template, you can learn to start putting the other pieces and parts on and realizing they're simply analogs. I don't remember where they are in the Gospel of Thomas. Remember the disciples asked him, when will we see the Son of the Living One, or something like that? And Jesus tells them, when you can strip off your garments and put them under your feet, and when the people come to take the field. I don't remember exactly what it is. Bear with me. The big idea here, though, is we're back to the field idea, that you are in a field in this case, and you are needing to strip bare, but the disciples are parts of you. So your characteristic, your qualities want to know, hey, when are you going to be okay? When do we get to see the Son of the Living One? When is our life going to be all right? And you resolve these things. Jesus lets them know, or the response here is that when you can strip your garments off and put them under your feet and stand above them, symbolizing what you have stripped off of you that you used to clad yourself in are now something that are beneath you, that you've elevated yourself above earth on them by learning and growing with them. In order to get your land, in order to get your peace of mind back, you must be able to strip the things off of you that you hide behind. These are stories that are going to be continuously emergent, where we're seeing that there's fields, this one is fields, but it could be wedding chamber, temple. It could be any analog, but it's going to be somehow that there's something up here that is not okay, that needs to be made okay in order for it to become purified again. Okay, I feel delinquent in one area. I should have my own version of the journey identified. I think what has already been identified is fairly accurate. It's just the way that they have it identified, where it is. Crossing the threshold, for example, that would emerge in teachings as in going through the clashing rocks in an Argonautica story, or going through the parted sea that collapses behind you as in the Hebrews story. Jesus has a variation where everybody is standing around the narrow gate where only a few are going to enter in. Same concept. But basically that's turning and going into the subconscious. That's why it's a narrow passage. We stop looking at the big broad thing and start looking at one very narrow thing. We go in to look at the one specific source. That element is there. But it's called crossing the threshold often. And then all the help and the aid and things like that. That's basically this right here, is looking at it, figuring out, understanding it, looking at the big cycle of it. Right now, there's a lot of fear that surrounds it is the reason it sits in place. So at this point in time right here, you go into the subconscious and you use the higher self and the conscious self to begin looking at the things and understanding them. What you're doing is creating space within you for a larger understanding. It moves us from our victim status, our small self, into a more expansive universal self, where we see the bigger picture and we are no longer that hurt person. We're trying to move that direction. And obviously that has always been an issue in society. This is the template. That's what emerges. They've been teaching this. Well, it emerges. So that's it. Yeah, I guess I have really been approaching this in the same manner that I learned it, starting out growing into it, and I realized, wait a minute. Actually, if you learn the template, it'll be easier. Things unfold. You go, oh, I start seeing how those parts fit. Once you know the template, you don't have to find the template anymore. Then what you're doing is this. You are learning what analogous terminology that they're using from their culture that represents the same parts that go on to that template. That is what you're doing, and you're finding that it fits. And if it doesn't fit, it's not there. Again, Jesus material may have additional things, warnings, you're going to get trouble along the way. It's not for everybody. They all teach that actually to some degree, so just in different languages. If you wanted to see the template, I would say Greek or Roman mythology, both of them. How many people could pull the sword out of the stone? There's a chosen person right there. Hidden in a basket, there's a person chosen right there. Jesus whisked away to prevent being slaughtered, and there's a chosen right there. Jason, in the story of the Argonautica as it begins, they're on a hunt, and there's a lot of skilled hunters, and he's young, but he's the one that wins and gets the boar. He's selected in there. You begin to see that these elements that look like different parts of a story actually are identifying that person as a single standout. Then it'll move on to the next step in some way. People are very cleverly creating stories off of this. It becomes, I think it's easiest to see there, yeah. And then when you get into Hinduism, which is very rich and complex with a lot of layers of density to it, it's easier to see it there. And in Abrahamic works as well. There's going to be some funny things that you see. The number 40, for example, appears, 350 times in the Bible or something like that. But you look at what it is, and it always precedes something. You look at things that stand out. And just to grab a few, usually 40 precedes something. It's kind of a time frame. We have 40 years in the desert for the Jewish people, right? They're moving into the desert. The desert is a barren place. We're looking to have a barren mind. And they're only going to consume manna, which means that they've cut themselves off from the world, and they're only focused on one thing, consuming spiritually one thing. We are doing that. 40 days is how long it takes to emerge, a rebirth, to come out the other side from after our flood, washing out the inside of our cup, as it were. Jesus, 40 days in the desert. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights before the purging occurred. Muhammad was 40 years old when he went into the cave, went into the empty place to receive the teaching. Anyway, it looks like 40 is being used in Abrahamic teachings to denote kind of a time frame that isn't a fixed time frame, but really is broadly means until the time of enlightenment, or till however long it takes from the time you've said, oh no, I can't do this anymore, to the time you emerge out the other side going, whew, I've done that. I've completed that cycle. That's 40 something. And that will emerge. But then you can see in that same time frame, you go to the Argonautica, and you will see 40 being used as how many people are brought on board the boat to go with them. And the Greeks are using 40 in this case. Why? And all of these gods that they're bringing on board have certain characteristics. So these are qualities that they're naming inside of you. They're both using 40 as an analog, but they're using it as a different analog. Well, one of them is denoting a time frame till enlightenment. The other one is denoting how many qualities you're going to take along on this trip. I see almost a story competition going on there. I see your 40 good things and I'll give you 40 bad things. Well, not really, but there are elements in the stories that show up out there from antiquity that don't match up. But it'll stay within that culture the same thing, but it might shift to something else in another culture. Some don't. Male and female, I think those are always the same, no matter where you see them emerge. 40, that might be something different. So when you're looking at the analogs, that they can vary a little bit, but within a culture they can stay consistent. Those are things to watch for. And it takes a long time to see it. It's almost like a language thing. It's a shifting of that, of the analogs, pretending you are 2,000 years ago. What are they using? How does it play out? What does it mean? How does it fit on that template? But then that kind of takes the mystery out of it too. The outer stories are rich and incredible and keep people, what would we do? What would we do? Anyway, hope this helps. If you're still looking, if you're looking for the template and looking to spot things, this is it. I'll end this video here. That I wanted to add more things in about that. I just began to realize that it's easier to learn the template and then find how it fits. Yeah, that's what I'm doing now, but I didn't think about that. I didn't start doing that way, but that's how it's working now. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. Love one another, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, this is that story I was going to hold off on. I've told a few throughout the videos. I'm very scientific. I don't get woo-woo. I really stay grounded. I don't look for things that aren't there. But I've had some things happen that I still can't explain. Well, maybe one. Maybe two. You've heard the one where I've said, I heard in my head, Larry's dead before I found my brother. And I believe that his mind, his conscious and my conscious, were able to communicate in that field. I've got a central nervous system. He has a central nervous system. We can feel, we can communicate. It didn't come to me right at the time. Obviously, he's dying at some point, hanging and feeling pain, crying out, calling out probably for a time frame, a short time frame. I'm busy. I don't hear it. It occurs to me at a later point in time. I almost think the communication was already done. I just wasn't aware of it. Only went at a certain point in time that it emerged to me. So I can explain that one. There was the 747 story, the one where I kept seeing the number 747 appear everywhere. It was mind-bogglingly over 2 years, and I couldn't get it. It's one of my earlier stories. I'll just summarize it here. And finally, it keeps showing up, and I don't know what it means. Finally, one day, someone sends me a temporary password to sign on to a site that they want me to go look at some material. And the temporary password is Luke 747. My middle name is Luke, and the 747 was there. So I was like, what? I quick asked them, what does that mean? Where did you get that? And they said, read your Bible, silly. Oh, I never figured it out. Luke 747 is the story that summarizes up the woman who loved incredibly. All of her sins were forgiven. Her life was okay because she just became the embodiment of love. That was an important lesson for me to learn at that time. So here it is. Oh, I'm getting this. I'm getting messages, but that one seemed very obscure because I'm seeking and knocking. I want things, but that one involved somebody else. Somebody else had to provide the information that I wasn't getting. So that one was like, wow, that one's getting out there a little bit. How does that happen? That's involving another human being now on something that's obscure enough that you're like, come on, what are the chances of Luke 747 being given to somebody who's looking for the next answer, whose middle name is Luke and has been seeing 747 for 2 years? Coincidence? Maybe. It's an anecdotal story, though. It's just one that happened to me. I'm saying it. I listen to these stories from other people, and I realized this is what the person probably had experienced. So, okay, well, as mystical as those seem to me, especially the one where it had to engage somebody else from a distance to bring me information, it was like, boy, that was pretty weird. This one is different, even farther out than that, I think. This occurred when I was about 18 years old and living in Seattle, and me and another guy were renting out this basement apartment and working in a drive-in. So I was working full-time there, but cooking burgers and fries and things like that. So yeah, it was not a bad life for a couple of 18-year-old kids goofing around. And while I was there, I was taking a break in the back room, and this occurred to me while I was there at the drive-in, which is just weird because it was so matter-of-fact that it was like the situation with my brother Larry. When it occurred to me, it sounded in my head like it was unquestionable. Not like a passing thought, but like something you had memorized. Anyway, this is actually what it was. Let us journey outside physical reality, yet within mental capacities, across hyperspace to the distant side of eternity, to a time that has yet to materialize. Existing as atoms electrically charged into vibratory rates incomprehensible to physical structure. Let us span the vast abyss of non-reality and discover the secrets hidden by emotion of how antimatter creates nothing and nothing creates anything. All right, it's been a long time, but I seem to remember my 18-year-old self going, where does that come from? Why is that there? It's like it just flashed into your head as a part of what you've always been. And it wasn't. It's fresh in your memory, but it acts like it's an old hat. Anyway, it took me 40 years to figure out what it is. And I used the same procedure on it that we use here. This is my Bizarro story. Let's take a look at it again. We go back to the first one. Let us journey outside physical reality, yet within mental capacities. Okay, outside physical reality, yet within mental capacities. This is a journey in the mind. It's a journey into the spirit world, across hyperspace to the distant side of eternity. Colorful verbiage to carry what we're doing. We're going to the distant side of where our mind is. We're not going to stay shallow at the conscious. We're going to go deep as far as we can go, to the distant side of eternity, to a time that is yet to materialize. This is a future thing. Moves on to the next one. Existing as atoms electrically charged into vibratory rates incomprehensible to physical structure. Somewhere down inside of here, we realize it's an energy world, not a physical world. There's something existing in a different way. And it is not something that we can comprehend physically. We have to look at it in a different way. Then finally it says, let us span the vast abyss of non-reality and discover the secrets hidden by emotion. Okay, the vast abyss of non-reality. The non-reality is the existence of our life that we think is real, but it really isn't us. What it really is the collection of perceptions that we continue to live our life through. Spanning the vast abyss of non-reality, this vast abyss is not only untrue, but it's fear. It is this wall that we have to face and discover the secrets hidden by emotion. Our emotion is what creates that fear. That's why it's a fearful wall right there, of how antimatter creates nothing and nothing creates anything. Those are weird. Star Trek, the first version, was out at that time. I'm sure I was hearing antimatter from there. It wasn't a part of my vocabulary. But I think, again, we're just looking at not really antimatter. What we're looking at is like what Lao Tzu teaches, is that whatever emerges comes from nothing, that we create what there is. Antimatter creates nothing and nothing creates anything. We start out empty and we create anything from life based on how we experience that life and store that life away. This eventually emerged as exactly what this path is. Where did it come from? How does that happen? Those are the things that make me go, wow. What is beyond? I can't see it. Sometimes you have experiences that make you go, what's out there? I don't think it's magical or mystical. I think that we don't understand it. And it seems magical and mystical. It really does. But this is information that is actually how life works. This is the framework of everything that we're doing. There's nothing new here. This exists. This knowledge exists in the psyche of mankind, the collective and individual. So it's not like this came from somewhere magical. But things work like that are magical. It's like things emerge through us if we have the capacity to sense and see and feel them. But anyway, yeah, these are the ones that I don't really talk about much because they go into that woo-woo world that I don't want to get into with people. And I think things happen like this. The more we are free and devoid of those things that we are carrying inside of us, the more this kind of life happens. Ultimately, that's what we're looking for. And somehow, as a humanity, we're always being told this. It's always there. The truth and reality is always there. We tend to look towards fantasy, and when we stop and we look towards reality, we find it right there. You want to seek and knock and have something magically appear? We're already carrying it. We're holding it. It's nearby. It won't magically appear. We just become aware that it's right here with us all the time. Looks like magic. Sounds like magic. Anyway, all right. That was my story. See you in the next video.